Happy Devil's Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 229, titled The Hughes Effect. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with PucksandPitchforks.com's editor-in-chief, Nick Villano. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on Let's Go Devils Network. Yeah, baby. Devils hockey around the corner. People filing in the chat rooms on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Nick, before we went on air, I was just telling you that John Marino is jacked. He's jacked. He's no longer a twig. He's an oak tree.
Yeah. I mean that's good. A lot of us forget that John Marino was one of the best defensemen in the league for half of last year, and then he got injured, and that kind of slowed him down a little bit for a while. So when he came back, he wasn't the same guy. He started getting there again towards the end of the season. We never saw that, whatever that ridiculous November was for him. It coincided with that Devils ridiculous streak. But yeah, once he came back from injury, there was something a little bit off. And you saw that, I think Dougie gained a little bit muscle last offseason because he was coming off an injury-plagued season. So, you see that a lot with defensemen especially.
Yeah, it's good to bulk up. You don't want to bulk up too much where you're top-heavy. You still need the agility. You still need the flexibility. You still need the athleticism to defend in front of your goaltender, which, little segue, I guess Keith Kincaid signing a one-year deal, two-way contract. It's up on pucksandpitchforks.com right now. I see it.
There's some complications with this one, right, Sam? When you kind of go into, the complications of this deal.
I don't see what's so complex about it, the complications or whatever. What? Tell me. Enlighten me.
So, Keith Kincaid signed with the Chicago Wolves of the American Hockey League in July. So he has a standing contract with the Chicago Wolves. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the Chicago Wolves lost their NHL affiliation this year. So they're no longer. They used to be the. They've been a bunch of teams. I think they were Vegas's first affiliate. They were last year. They were Carolina's affiliate. I assume they've been the Blackhawks affiliate. I don't know that for sure, but I know that they've shared a lot of affiliations. They haven't been able to come to a long-term contract agreement, and they were left without one this year. So they were trying to sign veterans. They were trying to, they need a supplement for the fact that they're not going to be able to get, the prospect system in their locker room. They like the Devils, or they're sending Tice Thompson and Graham Clark and Nico Dawes and Tyler Brennan. Like, those names can't go to the Chicago Wolves. So he signed with the Chicago Wolves in July. Fast forward to here, and Kincaid now signs a two-way contract with the New Jersey Devils. So what does that mean for his AHL contract? Well, I don't know if this is the technical term for it, but the Wolves still, I guess, own his rights. I don't know if it's a rights thing or if this was an agreement with the Devils where they're making a special arrangement. But basically, Kincaid is not allowed to play in Utica. If he's either going to be on New Jersey or he's going to be in Chicago. If he goes to Chicago, the Devils could call him up again just like any player from Utica. But it's still a little unclear. From when I wrote it, I was under the impression that the Devils have to pay his salary no matter where he is. So that $335,000 that you saw in the release today, it's a salary he makes when he's playing for the Chicago Wolves. And I think the Devils pay that. I don't know the salary cap implications of that. That's something for Cap Friendly that's beyond my gourd. But to kind of jump into what this means for the Devils, I've been saying for a while, don't be surprised if El Calgren is this team's backup to start the season. Now I'm saying don't be surprised if Keith Kincaid is this team's backup. I don't want that. I didn't want Calgren either. I think it's a bad situation you're going to put yourself in to rely on VTech to start the season that much. But they've said that they want Akira Schmid to be in the minors. I just don't. I don't know. I don't think it worked out. I think they've tried a lot of the goalie things, and nothing came to fruition. The price is really high in goalies. I think you just didn't see a lot of trades this year, right? Can you think of one goalie trade that happened?
No. By the way, thank you to Nate for the super chat, saying I was hoping the Giants game would tide me over while waiting for hockey season to start. But all they did was make me hungrier for Devils hockey. Getting back to what you were saying, Nick, about there weren't any really like significant goaltender trades this past off season. I'm
really trying to think. I can't
when I heard that Keith
you didn't even get like the Georgiev to Colorado when we got last offseason. Fleury seemed like an easy candidate to get traded. He didn't get traded.
Mm-hmm.
I know. So Casey DeSmith got traded, but he was like an afterthought in the Montreal Canadiens Pittsburgh Penguins deal that sent Petrie to Montreal, right? And then something else on the way back. I can't remember who, but that was basically just part of the Erik Karlsson trade. To be honest, everything was signings, right? Like I can't think. We thought one of the Boston goalies was going to get traded. Didn't happen. We thought maybe the Florida would make a move. Spencer Knight was up there. Didn't happen. We thought Seattle would make a move because they got Giger coming back, and they got a pretty good guy in Coachella Valley. I think is it the Cord who they have in Coachella Valley? I think that's it, but maybe that's the Flames guy. No, the Flames guy is Dustin Wolf. So I think they have the Cord in Coachella Valley who played really well for the AHL. We heard some rumblings. Obviously, we heard a ton of rumblings about Hellebuck, and they just decided to keep him because their price is insane. And we heard a ton of rumblings about Gibson, and they decided to keep him because I'm assuming their price is also insane. Let me ask you this, Sam. This might blow your mind. Is Mackenzie Blackwood the biggest goalie name that got traded this offseason?
In terms of height, maybe. But you could say that. Unless we're missing something here. But getting back to that Keith Kincaid signing, the first inkling when news broke about it and the deal, I'm like, wait a second, Chicago Wolf, is he doing like what some people did during the pandemic, where you're working from home remotely and you have two jobs for two different companies, and each company doesn't really know that you're working for the other company? Like that's what I first thought.
I can play for the Wolves on Wednesday. I'll play for the Devils on Thursday. I'll play for Utica on Saturday.
And nobody knows, right? Nobody knows that you're triple dipping, or double dipping in this case because he can't play in Utica. And how weird would that be if one minute he's in New Jersey and the next minute he's playing against Utica?
Yeah, that'd be wild. It's a very complicated deal. I believe this is the first time since the 95-96 season that there's a independent AHL team. So again, these are complications that, we haven't had to address in 3 or 4 collective bargaining agreements. Mm-hmm. It just hasn't come up.
So, but
and by the way, I've gone through what? Oh wait, this is. All right, they didn't update this. So never mind. Keep going.
Oh, well, I lost my train of thought as per usual. But you know what? It was kind of, I was thinking out loud a couple days ago, like, what do you do with Nico Dawes? What's his situation? He's going to be out for how long?
I would assume till Christmas.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, the hip is just so hard.
Yeah. It's hard to predict, if you're a GM. So you got to assume the worst. But Keith Kincaid kind of fills that void. It's somebody that the Devils are familiar with from the past. Doesn't interfere with any kind of development going on in Utica. So it's probably a win-win-win for everybody, I would think.
Yeah,
Plus,
I assume so.
Plus, he could be that emergency backup goaltender that leads you into the playoffs, like last time.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, Kincaid. I mean, listen, I don't think he has much left. I think this is kind of like when they signed Wedgwood a couple years ago. Wedgwood was a lot better, but this is kind of that. He's the third goalie. I expect them to put him on waivers once the season starts, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think, Nick. You know what I think? I think John Marino is jacked, and I'll tell everybody why. I'm going to pull up some pictures. I am going to pull up some pictures of John Marino, and I said this on the Woo Report earlier this morning on the Morning Woo that John Marino is jacked. He is jacked up. He's jacked up for the season. He's ripped. He's been conditioning. And the photos that came out from the VMAs prove that. I mean, here's a close-up shot of yours truly, John Marino. Look at those biceps. Or can you really see the biceps? Look at the arms, the guns. This is what you want. You want your defenseman to be bulking up a little bit, clearing out the crease. Let's maybe do a little bit of zoom on the live feed. Look at that. That's John Marino right there next to Timo Meier. He makes Timo Meier look like a small guy. And we all know that Timo Meier is a big guy. And he's going to do big things. And, but yeah, John Marino coming into camp, all fired up, all jacked up. That's great. Also, in other news yesterday, that Tomas Tatar went to the Colorado Avalanche at a nice AAV of $1.5 million. And I'll tell you what, Tomas Tatar, nice, classy touch, saying thank you. Thank you to the fans in New Jersey, not forgetting about us. And that's a good thing because you never know with Tomas Tatar with that kind of contract. Trade deadline, you need a little depth, maybe a second tour of duty with the New Jersey Devils. And I see Ted saying, hello, John Sumner. Said that Fitzy was betting 1,000% with me until I heard we got Kincaid. Why? Thompson is out there a lot, who I would prefer. You know, it all boils down to familiarity and, you know, I mean, right now we don't want a real competitive goalie competition right now. I mean, I think this deal makes sense in some respects that, you know, yeah, you know what? We've got our emergency guys. We're not expecting it, but hey, you know, he can hang out with the Wolves. And that's about it. And when we need him, we got him. And Kincaid's making some money. The Devils aren't spending so much money, basically the minimum. I think it's a good deal for everybody. I really do. I think it's a good deal for everybody. Second tour of duty. Looking on the YouTube Live, Steve Engel and Ted, are they talking about the Jets again? Oh, my God. Not the Winnipeg Jets, but the New York Jets. I don't know. Let's see here. Well, let's see here. Well, I'm seeing some other comments as well. But I think really the New Jersey Devils, where they're going this season, and we got a great guest coming on, another analytics guy, hockey consultant, Jack Hahn from Montreal, coming back. Also, Ted, this reminds me. I wanted to talk about this, about fans, like Devils fans, super fans. There's some super fans out there that are Devils fans. But Ted says, I'm glad Fireman Ed is back. Yeah, yesterday I saw, I don't know, a TikTok video or whatever of Dancing Larry at the Mets game. You know, Dancing Larry, that super fan, that Rangers fan, that's just, going crazy, doing his moves. He's like, yeah, trying to get the crowd pumped up, not really working in Citi Field. But I was like, all right, you got the Devils, Islanders, and Rangers representing. I'll tell you, wow. I was like, where are the New Jersey Devils fans at Citi Field representing? I know Eric Hollow was there, exchanging jerseys with Peterson. The New York Mets, that Peterson, David Peterson. Sorry, I was thinking another Peterson. Anyway, Ramona Rice is back in the YouTube live, but stated in the fan address presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. Nick Villano had to step out for a minute, so I'm flying solo like it is the Woo Report. But go to pucksandpitchforks.com for all your Devils needs. I'll tell you, we got a great guest coming on, and I've got some questions for him, about the Jack Hughes deal, the Hughes effect, how it's affecting the league, how it's affecting the New Jersey Devils. Salary cap matters. Money matters. You know it. I'll tell you, money matters in the National Hockey League, because when you have a hard cap, it's not like baseball where there's a luxury tax, where you have an owner like Stephen Cohen who has got an ungodly amount of money that he could just spend. Oh, I'll sell my my art collection of I'm thinking of an artist. I don't know. Think of an artist. Leonardo da Vinci. Was he an artist? I don't know. I'll just sell that for $15 million just so I can afford a relief pitcher. But money matters in the NHL. We want all these players. We want them all to ourselves. It's kind of like fantasy sports, but you can't treat hockey like that. Why? Because hockey is truly a team sport. It is a team sport, I'll tell you. And you can't treat hockey like fantasy hockey. But it is fun to think about it, though. But when you look at Jack Hughes, 8 years, $64 million. Again, 8 years, $64 million. And he's going to be entering the second year of that contract. After having a 99-point season. You want to talk about great value. Here's the great value here. It goes beyond dollars and cents, but let's just start with dollars and cents. For somebody of his caliber, Jack Hughes, making $8 million for about pretty much 100 points a season. One of the most exciting NHL players in today's NHL. The new generation, the new generational players. Remember Ovechkin and Crosby, they're getting up there in age, but Jack Hughes is one of them, an elite. But he also set the tone and left some meat on the bone to surround himself with better players, giving the Devils that flexibility, taking some of the pressure off of him, giving back to the team, which, is very unselfish. Very unselfish. The team concept is more valuable to Jack Hughes in this part of his career because he's out there to win cups. The first one is the hardest. The first one is the hardest to win the cup, in my opinion. But once you figure it out, and you've got a blueprint as a player, you know what it takes because you've been there, done that. So right now, Jack Hughes is sitting in the second year of his $8 million, $64 million total AAV. AAV is the $8 million. $64 million total. That means we've got Jack Hughes for 7 more years towards the end of the decade at a great value. And part of the risk there for Tom Fitzgerald was at the time when he offered that contract, Jack Hughes injured his shoulder. Remember that little dirty cheap shot there by the Seattle Kraken? Game 2 of the previous season. And he only showed some glimpses. And so there was a risk on it by Tom Fitzgerald to give him that kind of contract. But it was a good risk. It was a calculated risk. And it's going to pay off dividends. To have Jack Hughes at that price, knowing that, and Jack Hughes knows that if he wins a couple cups with New Jersey, he knows that everything will take care of itself towards the end of his current contract. That an extension would be in the works. You would want Jack Hughes to be your franchise leader, franchise player to the end of his career. Assuming that the projections are correct, generational player, generational numbers, generational leadership, and also a Stanley Cups to last a generation. I'm telling you, Tom Fitzgerald is building a dynasty here in New Jersey. And it's amazing how he fit Timo Meier in. The players that bought in. Jesper Bratt took a while. But he came to his senses knowing that, look, this is the best deal you're going to get with the best potential chance of winning a Stanley Cup. Not just one, but possible multiples. Multiples! Now, I know I'm getting ahead of myself right now. Totally getting ahead of myself. But, I'll tell you, Jack Hughes, that deal, again, the Hughes effect. We're going to talk to Jack Hahn about it a little bit later, about what that means in the NHL. And remember, that deal, Jake Sanderson, the guy that Nick Villano didn't like when we were talking about draft picks. When we were talking about draft picks not too long ago, and he signs an 8 million type deal. So the Hughes effect. And guess what? We'll bring back Nick Villano back from the South Jersey bunker as he was holding the fortress together because I guess there's a hurricane coming. Are you dealing with some rip currents?
I'm on the other side of Jersey, so no rip currents here. Unless a rip current hits the Delaware
Nick,
River.
I'm really covering up what really happened, and you could just play along that you're in a fortress somewhere.
No, I'm just a father, and the baby's being a baby. So
yeah, well, you know
I
what?
go unbaby that baby.
Yeah, well, my wife always tells me I'm like the biggest BSer in the world, and I just BS'd that time. So,
well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So we were talking all sorts of stuff. Jack Hughes' contract. We were talking about John Marino being jacked. Showed even a picture. If you want to see a picture, real quick.
Sure. Yeah, let's see the picture.
Yeah, this is the stall tactics before. That's John Marino's arm.
That's not photoshopped, huh?
No, he could. That was at the VMAs yesterday. He could literally kill Jacob Trouba right now. He can kill Jacob Trouba. That's all
I saw a post
say.
right before I got on the podcast that was talking about Jacob Trouba being into painting. I was like, I don't know what this is supposed to do, but sure, buddy.
Yeah, he should
paint.
Go ahead.
I just don't what is the value of some of these? You know what I mean? I'm always I don't know. I
know
get
what,
it. You
Nick,
want to find like the sweeter side of these guys, but just let him be a tough guy.
You know, Nick, could I paint a picture for pucksandpitchforks.com and submit it as an article?
No.
Okay. By the way,
unfortunately, unless you paint 250 words minimum,
okay,
it's not going to work.
Oh, that's great. By the way, in all serious notes, we were talking about hurricanes. Little Fireboy, Alan Kozman, up in Nova Scotia, he's going to be working Saturday night as the Hurricanes slated to hit Nova Scotia. So we're praying for you, Alan, and keep us posted how things go, because you look at the Boston area in Nova Scotia, they look like they're in the bullseye in terms of
yeah. How far away is it?
Right now from there? I think it's in the Mid-Atlantic somewhere.
Is this Lee? This is right.
Yeah,
right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and I had to explain this to somebody in my day job, because they were warning Florida about Lee. And I was like, don't do that. Like, because it was just off the coast of Africa, and everybody saw that the storm was going to be something. But I'm looking at Lee right now, just because, and there is a lot of agreement in spaghetti models, but what the spaghetti models are, when you see on the news all those different lines going towards the same thing, what that is that's different weather centers from across the globe, and that's their track. So each weather center, the National Hurricane Center.
Really?
You always hear about actually it's not the NHS. That's my fault. The NHS monitors it. The Euro, which is a European model. There's a US model. There's a bunch of other smaller. No, the US model and the Euro are the two that like get the most hype. There's a bunch of other smaller models, but that's what the spaghetti models is. It's what those models are tracking, right? And that's why there's there's slight difference. There's models right now that have Lee just making a right-hand turning and going up. And you see all these different these hurricanes kind of make these unexpected turns. That's because everybody's just watching the cone, right? And what the cone is the entirety of the model is put into one. Sometimes there's an outlier model that they won't take into it just because they can't. Like this one that's making a right turn, you can't put that into a cone. But what the cone does, it's like, there's a lot of agreement right next to the hurricane, right? Once you get a day out, there's less agreement. Once you get 2 days out, there's even less agreement. Once you get 3 days out, there's not a ton of agreement. There's when I'm looking at these, there's some that's going into Halifax. There's some that's going into New Brunswick. Did I say that? Is that NB? Is it New Brunswick in Canada?
Oh, I thought that was in Jersey.
maybe I'm saying that wrong. It's been a while since high school geography. But anyway, basically, just so you guys know, that's how you track those spaghetti models. And the spaghetti models is better to look at because you can kind of see where there's agreement. And I'm telling you, I had a weather person who said rule number 5, Dennis Phillips, because I think he's going to get mad at me if I don't mention him. Dennis Phillips down in Tampa. Rule number 5 basically means don't worry about it until you have to worry about it. Don't freak out. Just stay calm. Be prepared, but don't panic. So all of our listeners in Canada, give it a day before you really start to be like, okay, we need this, we need this, we need this. And then, have your evacuation plan in place. Think about where you're going to go. The good news is that it's going to Nova Scotia, so you can go west, and it's very unlikely that it's going to impact, if you go to Quebec or Ottawa or even like Maine. Like Maine is close, but if you go to New Hampshire, like you should be safe. Like that's kind of like how this is looking.
Gotcha. I thought a spaghetti model was they just threw a spaghetti up on the map, see what's stuck. Because I saw one spaghetti model where it literally hits New Jersey. This is like way back when, maybe 2 days ago.
Yeah, this is a while ago.
Yeah.
So that's the issue with spaghetti models is that once you get more than 2 days out, it's just like there's too many different opinions.
Yeah. And there's too many variables that haven't even factored in yet. The low pressure system is going to. Anyway, what are we talking about? Hurricanes. I hate the hurricane. I hate the Hurricanes.
Canes suck from what I hear.
Yeah, I mean the bracelet
and covering them in Florida and Texas, they do suck. Hurricanes suck.
Yeah.
But can I get to a point that I didn't get to address that you were talking about?
Oh,
and
sure.
About the Hughes effect, because I want to talk about this. Jack Hahn's coming on. Jack Hahn is a famous analyst. He's worked in hockey, and right now he's just kind of a freelancer. He has a newsletter. He writes books. He's one of the smartest hockey people that is out there, and I'm incredibly excited to have him on. But what I wanted to talk about is this Jack Hughes contract and how we're seeing a lot of 8x8s from these guys who haven't proven themselves. And you talked about Sanderson, and I'm still not sold on Sanderson, Sam. I think he's much better than what I thought he was. I thought he was going to be a bust. Not a bust. I'll give you that. But I think he's good. He's good. If they were the same age, I wouldn't trade Marino for Sanderson. I think Marino is better. Like, the full package is better than Sanderson. I think it's going to be. That's probably crazy to a lot. Maybe there's a little bit of bias because I looked so closely at Marino at his peak last year. That's what I'm really focusing on. But I also watched some Sanderson because I was curious. Like, what did I miss? You want to see, like, I'm not one of those people that runs away from my bad analysis. And that was a loss on me. I've had some losses in the past. Going against Sanderson was one of them. If people remember, we took Holtz in that draft. I would have taken Holtz over Sanderson at the time if Sanderson was available. Probably the wrong move at this point, but, we got to let it play out. Anyway, I want to ask about the contract. How is a guy who's proven a little, like, how is he getting an $8 million contract? I think it's because it worked out for Tom Fitzgerald. Tom Fitzgerald now has the best contract in the sport. And I guess you can, weigh it out, because Connor McDavid's contract obviously is Connor McDavid's contract is very good, but it's $12 million. But it's for the best player in the league. Is he? But then you look at it, like, let me ask you this, Sam: Is Connor McDavid? I'm trying to think. Is he 50% better than Jack Hughes?
You can't compare apples and oranges because Connor McDavid is like 5-6 years. He's in his prime right now.
Yeah.
So he's getting his prime contract. He's getting his big fat contract. Hughes won't hit that for another 6 years. So
I don't think 6. I think you hit your prime at 24 now. I think we're like 3 years away from it.
I'm talking about contracts. His next big contract is after this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's what I mean. So, and McDavid, he is in his prime. So, I would say right now, again, you look at Hughes' situation versus McDavid's situation. I mean, Hughes' contract is such tremendous value. I mean,
yeah.
But I would say McDavid is the better player right now.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm not. Then that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to put into context, and it's kind of funny because McDavid almost had exactly 50% more points than Hughes because Hughes had 99 and McDavid had somewhere around 150, right? So it's kind of funny that that's how that worked out. But it's how big is that gap? There's definitely a gap. If I said 20, you said, yeah. Connor McDavid is definitely 20% better than Jack Hughes, but is he 50? And you're like, and then again, it kind of gets into this weird entanglement. Like, what does percentage better really mean? If you're talking about points, then yes, it's like that's kind of like where they're at is at 50% better. But if you talk about like skill and impact on the game, it's like, but the point I'm trying to make is that the Devils made this ballsy move. Like, when Fitzgerald signed that deal, everybody's like, what did he do to deserve that? A lot of Devils fans are like, no, this is smart. Like, this is incredibly smart. You don't have to deal. And a lot of this, Sam, you know what I think this was? I think Devils fans were so excited because, A, we've dealt with the Parisi nonsense. We dealt with the Kovalchuk contract nonsense that got voided. They had to send another one. Blah 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 blah. We've dealt with a lot of contract nonsense. We've signed guys in the prime like Zajac. The Zajac contract wasn't great. But then we signed guys before the prime, like Severson. You know, as much hate as Severson got, having him for 6 years at it was less than 4.25. It was $4.16 million. Fantastic contract. The contract was great. Even as like a third line, like high upside third line power play penalty kill guy, like great contract. He's a 20-minute per game guy. So when you see Jack Hughes, going back to the point, when you see Jack Hughes signing an 8x8, and just he's already blown it out of the water. We're 2 years into this contract, right? This past year was the second year. I think
it was
right.
First year. Last year was his first year.
Last year was his fourth year in the league. Okay.
Yep.
1 year into this, he's wildly outplaying this contract, and he has 7 more years of this. Teams are going to mimic that. Do you know what that really reminds me of? And I was talking about this. It reminds me of those mid-2000s Penguins, or maybe it was in between 2009 and 2012. Everybody mimicked what the Penguins were doing. I have a star player, get a lesser player who has a lot of skill, pay him whatever Chris Kunitz was making, and everybody tried to do these repeatable things with all of these players. But what was the problem, Sam, is that they were paying the wrong players. They were paying the Louis Ericssons. You were paying the Kyle Okposos. You were paying these players you thought could turn into that Kunitz, who was making $2 to $3 million, and thought that, well, because of Kunitz, I'm going to have to pay this guy $6 million. And that's going to happen here. There's going to be one of these contracts that's just devastating to a team. And we see even the Devils. Like, the Devils have put a lot of risk into these 8-year deals. Like, you see, maybe it's affected the Devils. Like, think about that, Sam. Tom Fitzgerald said he wasn't letting Jesper Bratt sign anything but an 8-year deal. That is a risk for a guy like Jesper Bratt. Bratt has been really good, and he's shown that he is much better than a 6th-round draft stock. He's shown that he's a great winger. But you're still kind of like, is he like one of the best wingers in the NHL? And I don't know if you could say that. He's not even the best winger on the team. That's Timo Meier, right? Who also signed an 8-year deal. Who, again, that one comes with risk because he wasn't. I mean, I think I got to call a spade, Sam. He wasn't as good in New Jersey as he was in San Jose. Something wasn't clicking to that level. He was good in New Jersey, but he earned that 8-point whatever contract from his time in San Jose, and that transitioned to what he did. And then, in the playoffs, he provided the physical presence that the Devils really needed. He got under the skin of Igor Shesterkin. He did a lot of the other things, but that's neither here nor there. These contracts are a risk. These 8-year deals are a major, major, major risk. But I think you have an introduction to do, Sam.
Yes. First time on the State of the Fan address. His name is Jack Hahn, hockey consultant. You can find him on Twitter or X at JHahnHKY. Jack, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
Hey, fellas, doing great. I was actually tuning in and listening to Nick throw shade on Jesper Bratt. Like, Jesper Bratt's a good player, man. You can't be throwing shade like that.
I'm just saying 8-year contracts are a risk, right? Like, that's a risk no matter who it is.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm looking at the notes that I got, and we'll talk about 8-year deals, right? Mm-hmm. But first, just to introduce myself a little bit, but I've been working full time in hockey for a decade now. First, I was on the digital media side with the Montreal Canadiens, but I played since I was a kid. I was coaching since I was 18 years old, and I ended up actually getting hired to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a player development role, which I worked from 2017 to 2020. The last year of which I was an assistant coach at the AHL level. So I've kind of done a few things in the hockey world. But what you guys may not have known, and because you didn't ask me, but I was actually a Devils fan growing up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
how that happened was I, I I learned how to play hockey in Montreal, and that's where I did my elementary school. But I did my middle school in New Jersey because my parents worked for a tech company in Jersey. You know, right around the .com bubble, like right before it burst, like we were in Jersey. So that's where I kind of fell in love with like actually watching the game and paying attention because before that I was too young. So like I really got into watching like every single game back in like 2001, I want to say.
Wow. That's a great
So you know,
time.
so
That's a really good
yeah,
team to jump into.
saw the Devils won a lot of games, and then the funny thing with life is when I went to Toronto, Lou Lamoriello was actually and Kyle Dubas, but Lou was doing the interview, so he was a tough nut to crack. Like, but that was a great memory.
That's
So
wild.
anyway, yeah. So that's the
Do
New
you have
Jersey
any good Lou
connection.
Lamoriello story that you could tell real quick? I know you don't have many because you're not allowed to say them, but because he's Lou Lamoriello. But is there any like fun Lou Lamoriello like thing like that he does? Does he like strawberry ice cream or like something that would like make us all laugh?
He wasn't a fan of Taco Tuesday. If you
Oh,
want to talk about food, but actually, the first year I was in Toronto, I was actually working out of Montreal, and I would go once in a while. And one of the first games of the season, Lou actually traveled to the Bell Center, and I caught up with him up in the press box, and we were just like chatting, like two colleagues. And I asked him like, oh, like don't you feel stressed in this job? Like, how do you kind of stay sharp and stay kind of you know um, kind of ready to do the job? And Lou looked at me like I was stupid, but he was like, if I'm tired, I sleep. If I'm hungry, I eat. Like there's nothing to it, right? I don't remember his exact words, but he
yeah,
just
but that's
but that's the attitude you got to have to work in the NHL and still work at that level when you're in your 80s, right? Like you can't be too like it's weird because like I really like working for and with Lou because I kind of see him not just as a boss but kind of like a life mentor. Like I just want to have like Lou's mojo, right? Like when I'm in my
mm.
80s, like that's the way I want to be.
Right, and like honestly, like say what you want about Lou today, but he's still cranking out deals. He's still the best. I mean, he's still one of the best negotiators in the business. Like a lot of these, he's still winning trades against like guys less than half his age. The Bo Horvat trade. I don't like the contract, but the trade, like the compensation, was insane that he got that for that. So Lou has still got it in definitely in most aspects of this game, and he's a great guy to kind of learn from. I do want to sing your praises, Jack, because I if people don't know who you are by now, they're doing themselves a disservice. You are one of the great minds in this sport, and when I found you a couple years ago, I take everything you say as gospel, and every one of our listeners should do the same. So make sure you follow him on Twitter, Jahan Hockey HKY. So JHANHKY. So make sure he's always tweeting stuff out, and his books are phenomenal. Make sure you go buy his books. I want to talk about your latest book, Hockey Tactics 2023. There's a very familiar silhouette on the cover of that one. I won't blow your spot, but there's one that looks like a very similar New Jersey Devils star. So let's talk about Jack Hughes. Did we see his peak or something close to his peak last year, or is there another gear that this guy can have?
Okay, so just to give some context to those who are less familiar, every year I put out an ebook that kind of walks you through NHL hockey in a way that like someone who works inside the game would kind of explain it to you, and it's been very popular. And the cover from the latest edition is Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes, and Nate McKinnon, who I consider to be four of the best younger centers in the league, because obviously there's Crosby, Malkin, so on and so forth. But like I really think Hughes is in that conversation now because you looked at how the Devils played last year, which is super explosive off the rush, right? Scored a ton of goals, control play. like they couldn't play that way without him. Obviously, Nico Heischer's a great center. He would be a good number one on most teams, but it just so happened that the Devils, they have the luxury of both. But like, I mean, I just think he's one of the great centers in the league right now. Like, what more is there to say? Like, most fan bases, I think, would absolutely love to have. Obviously, it's the first overall pick, right? Like, they don't. These players don't walk the streets, but I think it's just it's the right player at the right time on the right team, and I'm just gonna give it away kind of off the bat. But I think the Devils are one of the top Stanley Cup contenders heading into next season. Like, I know Sam was asking me about it, but there's like, if we start the season, let's say with 5 or 6 teams who are going to be in that mix, like absolutely the Devils are going to be in that mix.
So let's talk about that. Let's jump ahead. I do want to ask you about that. So let's go into detail. What makes them there? Because there are some issues that, how many teams have won the cup with Vitek Vanacek level goaltending? So what? How can you make that claim? What are you seeing that makes you think this is what a Stanley Cup roster looks like?
Well, obviously goaltending is super important, right? Like, you need a goalie who plays, at least gives you like 900 hockey in the regular season, maybe 910 in the playoffs, right? So that he's not actively losing games for you. But I mean, when you look back to when Chicago won the cup the first time, they had Antti Niemi as a goalie, right? Like, I don't think Vanacek is that much worse than Antti Niemi. Maybe Akira Schmidt is even better, right? So, like, that stuff can change in a hurry. Like, Vegas, like Aiden Hill starts out he'd be 3 or 4 in the depth chart at the start of the year. All of a sudden, he catches fire, they win a cup. So, but it's the things which are hard to find, which is a superstar center, Jack Hughes, right? A second really good center who could play number one elsewhere, which is Nico Hischier. You have a number one defenseman who drives play really well, Dougie Hamilton. You have some complementary defensemen, Siegenthaler or you name it, and then maybe Luke Hughes. He busts out and he becomes a top 4 player. Now, like, the pieces that are hard to get, the Devils have.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking about Marino, because Marino had this. He had a very strange season. Like, now that you look at it from like a 30,000-foot view, but in November he looked like a top 15 defenseman in the league, and then he got hurt. He kind of was like struggling back, but like, when he got over that injury, like towards the end of the season, he was back to not where he was in November, but a top 30 defenseman in this league. When you have that on top of Dougie Hamilton, on top of what Luke Hughes brings, I agree with you. I think that it's hard to deny this team is anything else but one of the teams to look at to maybe win it all.
Yeah, and I think it's easy, I think, to get a little bit too antsy as a fan base and say like, oh well, last year they lost against Carolina because they got shut down and they made a ton of turnovers and this and that. But like, they're right where they're supposed to be, right? Like, you're not really supposed to come out and win it the first time this group is together. And last year, it was the first year that this group was together, in that form, right? Even with Luke Hughes kind of just getting NHL games, and still got maybe Alexander Holtz who can come in and play an important role, and so on and so forth. So, like, I think this group is well on its way. And like, all the important cornerstone pieces are there, right? So now it's a matter of finding kind of complementary players who can fit around it. Like, I recently wrote something on Thomas Tatar, right? Like, I like Thomas Tatar as a player, watched him a ton when he was in Montreal. He wasn't the right player for that group, in that given time, but I understood I see what the thought process was, right? But maybe you just find those complementary players who are going to perform a little bit better, and all of a sudden, this group gets over the hump.
Yeah, and I see it. Like, and I hear it from a lot of people I trust, a lot of people who, it's almost like I try to be so unbiased when I look at the Devils, because I have to write so much about them, and I have to like look at it. I don't want to be, I know we have a fan-driven site, but I don't want it to be so fan that it's unreadable. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
always tend to try to be on the cautious side. I'm excited. Like, listen, when Nikita Gusev was traded for, everybody thought the Devils were going to win the Stanley Cup that year, and it was like, let's. I mean, I'm sure we're fine, but like, let's calm down. And then it turned out that they weren't fine. The Devils were not in a good spot. But it's different now. It's we saw it, right? That Devils team was living on a Taylor Hall MVP year that was 2 years prior at that point. They were living off of a Corey Schneider that had just dealt with so many hip injuries. So there was a lot of big issues with that team. This team doesn't have those issues. The one issue is probably what happened to like Vitek Vanecek melted in the playoffs. That is your only issue. Akira Schmid stepped up. Even in the Carolina series, Schmid was not terrible. He got laid out to dry a couple times and let up goals. It is what it is. I do want to pivot a little bit because I think that was a great conversation. I think that was good insight to kind of see how the national lexicon is kind of looking at the Devils. But I want to talk about how the national lexicon is reacting to a contract that the Devils signed. I think it was 2 years ago now. The 8x8 that Jack Hughes signed. I've seen multiple of these that have come up afterwards. The Stutzel contract is one that comes up, and again, that worked out in spades. The latest is the Jake Sanderson contract. 8 by I forget like the actual number, but it's 8 and a little more than
8x8, I
$8 million.
think. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
8x8, the same exact contract that Hughes signed. Do you think people looking at the Hughes gamble and now the Stutzel gamble as well, working out as well as it did, do you think that's impacting other teams being like they want to get these value contracts before that player hits that number and beyond?
Okay, so like I'm more of a coach than a manager. Like it's
Mm.
never been my job to negotiate contracts. Like certainly I was part of the research process, right? Finding comparables, identifying upsides and downsides, and trying to quantify the risk. And the thing is, it's like um, we gotta kind of dissociate because it's a lot of money, right? It's an insane amount of money by in layman's terms, over 8 years, which is a long time. Uh, but the way that you assess risk versus reward is like one of the easier ways to do it is look at past comparables, right? So for in terms of Jack Hughes, you have a first overall pick or a lottery pick who scored an insane amount in juniors, who went directly from USHL to the NHL, and I believe was one of the first skaters to do that,
I think it
at
was
least
the
from the
first.
USHL. Yeah, the first, because there had been players who've gone from U.S. high school, which is even weaker competition, to the NHL, like Phil Housley, Tom Barrasso, like in the '80s. But yeah, so one of a kind player in terms of his path. But if you look at his production, you could already make a case that we're talking about a generational player, and a future Hall of Famer even before he played a single NHL game. And then obviously his first season was quite difficult, but he still scored well, right? Like he didn't drive play, but he put up some points. And then since then, the play driving has followed. The points have the point production has really become top end. So it's actually, if you have an opportunity to sign this player to an 8-year deal, you do it because it's actually a risk. It's a bigger risk to bridge him than to go as long as you can. Because when you look at past comparables, all of them have thrived and been dominant players. And if you bridge that player, all of a sudden in years, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're looking at 10, 12, 15 million per season, which that becomes the risk, right? So for a player like Jack Hughes with his past production and his kind of current production, it's actually like if you can sign him for 20 years, you should sign him for 20 years, right? Uh, like with
I would.
the Penguins, like
Why not?
yeah, I mean they kept Mario Lemieux for as long as he played, and they're going to keep Sidney Crosby for as long as they played, and I think Jack Hughes is going to be in that category of players. So if one day the cap allows you to sign a 20-year-old player with that kind of pedigree to a 20-year deal, you should probably do it. Right?
And it's funny because you talk about 20. I'm going to go on a journey real quick. Just follow me.
Yeah.
You talked about a 20-year deal, and that just reminds me of the 17-year deal that Kovalchuk signed with the Devils.
Yeah.
I want to jump back to Lou for just 2 seconds because I got to talk about these long contracts. Obviously, the Kovalchuk contract turned out as terrible as possible because he retired, right? But I still say the shrewdest move that Lou Lamoriello ever put in was he put a void in that contract. So that if Kovalchuk pulled some nonsense, he's out of it completely. He has no, they hold it. If you remember, when Kovalchuk came back, if Kovalchuk was still under contract with the Devils, he couldn't go anywhere. Like the Devils would hold his rights, but they would also owe him whatever was left on that contract, and that would also hit the salary cap. Putting that void in there, when he retired, the Devils were like, whatever, go do your thing, go sign with the Kings. So, I just talking about contracts, you talked about those long contracts, and obviously that Kovalchuk contract is probably one of the reasons why that 8/7 year limit is in there. But it just got me thinking about how Lou Lamoriello made one of the shrewdest moves, saw what could be coming up, and put in a protection for the Devils there.
Yeah, so there was a point where Kovalchuk was like a top 5, maybe top 10 forward in the league, and when you have an opportunity to sign a player like that, then you sign him, right?
Yeah, and he did. But he also
Yeah.
knew that he might be a top 5, top 10 head case in the league. So let me put some protections in for my team.
Yeah.
So if he pulls some shenanigans, we're protected. So it's just funny how his mind works. He's not the guy who's excited to get to the table, just sign whatever they say. Like he's still gonna see how do I make sure that this doesn't burn me in the future.
Mm-hmm. So then you want to talk about the Jake Sanderson deal, right? And on the surface, it looks really similar because you have a deal for a player of a similar age, right, 21, and a first round pick, right, a top prospect who's made a pretty quick adjustment to the NHL. But the thing with Sanderson is that the risk profile is way different because instead of having a center who scores at a Hall of Fame caliber in his early years, you have a defenseman who, despite being a really good skater and really skilled, is from a production point of view, he's solid, but nothing really special, right? So, on the top end, maybe he becomes a top end defenseman. Let's say probably the most favorable comparison I could say is Miro Heiskanen just because of the skating ability, but Heiskanen he's as good offensively as he is defensively and as good on special teams as he is 5-on-5. So Sanderson may or may not get there, but certainly I think that's the kind of the upper limit of what he can be as a player. And Miro Heiskanen has a long-term deal at very similar money, if not a little bit more. So that's probably where Ottawa's head was at. But then if you look at other possible scenarios, maybe Sanderson is a player who does really well, in terms of his defensive play and his skating, but the point production and the offensive playmaking never really matures, and he never really becomes an elite player at that level in the NHL. So, how would you feel about having Siegenthaler at 8x8? You probably wouldn't feel great, right? Because so that's the kind of risk, right? Because either you can have Heiskanen for 8 years, or you can have Siegenthaler for 8 years at $8 million. So that's kind of that conversation of, I think, in Ottawa, there's already a lot of nervousness because when you look at the little details in Sanderson's game, not that he can't get better, he's going to get better, but it's just, is that high end potential there? And would maybe a bridge contract be better? Because if he's going to be kind of a number 2, number 3 defenseman who puts up, 30, 40 points a year, maybe you bridge him so you minimize the risk of giving him all that money up front, and then later on you can still get away with signing him to maybe a 5 or 6 year deal at $8 million per, or maybe even less if he doesn't quite pan out.
Yeah, and I agree on that. That definitely. Sanderson was I was off Sanderson when he got drafted. So this contract seems abjectly insane to me, but it is what it is. He's definitely proven me wrong as like not being a draft bust, but I don't think he's an $8 million defenseman. But that, it is what it is. I'm going to pivot one more time. I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to keep you too much
Actually,
longer.
before that, I'm going to plant that seed, right? Because you wanted to compare Sanderson to Jack Hughes. But let's imagine for a second, Luke Hughes plays the whole year with the Devils, puts up some points, maybe earns himself some good ice time. Are you going to give Luke Hughes 8x8 when that moment comes, when his ELC runs out? I'm just going to plant that seed in there because that's the conversation that I think the Devils are going to have, which is, do they bridge him or do they think that he's a real deal? Because if they think that he's a future number one, then you should probably look at 8x8. If he thinks that he's more going to be kind of more of a complementary player or a guy who's really good offensively, but who's got some warts and who's, not maybe your all situation guy, then maybe, bridge him and see what happens.
Yeah, and the Luke Hughes thing is complicated because he is Jack Hughes' brother. Like that's part of it, which is great for marketing, great for selling jerseys, great for the sales staff. The graphics department loves it. Like everybody, like the social media department loves it. But what you don't love is if you sign into a bad contract, if you sign him to 8x8 because you want that side by side with Jack, you want everybody to be happy, and he doesn't work out. Like you can't trade. Are you going to trade the star player's brother? So after he signs an $8 million contract, so that one does get complicated.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like I wouldn't get too smug about this Jake Sanderson deal because that's going to be a big decision, right? Like you were talking about handing out 8-year deals to Broad and Meyer, but this Luke Hughes contract is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? That's something I got to look into because that's coming up. They can do it next year, so they can do it next offseason. So it is coming up. But I don't. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about your newsletter. And I don't know if it's the most recent one because I don't know if you had one out today or yesterday, but one of the most recent ones you talked about mental toughness. And I've heard from everybody and their mother about how the Devils had no playoff experience and that was going to make them lose to the Rangers. It looked that way for the first two games. The Devils had said so. They were a little, we'll call it starstruck, call it nervous, call it whatever. They came out, they stunk. They went down 0-2. They ended up winning in 7. Now, we've seen that with teams like Colorado. We've seen it with Tampa, where early playoff failures lead to later playoff success. Talk about that mental toughness and kind of how you went into it with your newsletter. Promote the newsletter a little bit because I think that's a good asset for anybody who's a hardcore hockey fan, which a lot of our listeners are. And talk about if you think that the mental toughness that comes from winning a series like that Ranger series can progress into this year.
Mm-hmm. So just first I'll plug the newsletter. So what happened was during the pandemic, I left the Toronto Maple Leafs, and obviously there wasn't any hockey going on. And I was kind of thinking, okay, like what can I really do to kind of keep myself relevant here? And my idea was to start a newsletter, basically sharing all the stuff that NHL coaches wouldn't tell you because they're working in the NHL and they're not in the business of sharing all their secrets. So really just a newsletter for like the hardcore hockey geeks who really want to know what's going on. I have professional players like NHL players reading, professional coaches. And the really special thing is like, not only am I out there like sharing that information, but also I keep myself current because I work for teams, professional teams in Europe. My client this year is in Liga. And also I work in professional women's hockey. So basically like I'm just taking the best information that's out there. I'm sharing it with you, and nobody's giving me any crap because I'm my own boss at this point. So you really get the truth and the unfiltered stuff. So just about the mental toughness, like I think just the Devils, like they're one of the best rush teams in the league. But in terms of how they play in the offensive zone and how they forecheck and how they defend, they're still a young team. They're going to get better at that. But the rush play and just their ability to make these big plays is there. So all you need is the reps, right? Like you put in the reps, you give yourself opportunities to succeed. by keeping this group together and committing to your style of play, and eventually it's going to happen. So hopefully it's not going to take as long as it did for Washington. But don't expect it to happen right away because for Colorado, I think people were anointing them Stanley Cup champs about 2 years before they actually won the thing. So I'm looking at a Colorado type of time frame, which means that be mentally ready for another couple of playoff setbacks. But if that doesn't happen, then you're the champs, and congrats. But you're gonna get there. You're gonna get there. Like, you just have to stick with it. Trust your group. Make little adjustments around the fringe, and just continue to get better at the things that you're not quite, dialed in, and you'll get there.
See, that complicates it because, there's conditions on our first round pick this year that if we make the conference final, we need to give it to San Jose. So now I have to I want to see
Doesn't matter.
Better.
Doesn't matter because that player, even if you have a first round pick, that player is not going to help your team for another 3 or 4 years, at which point half of your core players are going to be maybe a little bit too old. So, you look at Vegas, right? They kind of made this calculated bet that basically all of their draft picks and all of their non-NHL ready prospects are expandable.
Yeah.
And they won the cup, right? Again, you see it all the time where teams, let's say with the 15th overall pick, they'll pick a player who they think will be an impact player 5 years down the road. And then 5 years go by, and this asset goes from being worth quite a bit as a 15th overall pick to a replacement level player. Happens all the time. So don't worry too much. When your team is as good as the Devils are right now, don't worry too much about those conditional draft picks. Just don't, because in 4 or 5 years, a lot can change.
I appreciate that because and you know what, you kind of talked me into it. Now I'm like, let's go, conference final, Stanley Cup final. If they win it all, then who cares? But that the heartbreak of this, losing the conference final or Stanley Cup final would be worth it if it leads to growth and it leads to more in the end. So, but Jack Hahn, I really appreciate you spent a lot of time with us tonight. I really appreciate it. If you're not signed up for his newsletter, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're not buying his books or you're downloading his books, again, if you love hockey, this is the guy you got to listen to. Jack Hahn, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else to plug or I know we talked about the newsletter and the books. Anything else?
No, we're good. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Devils can do this season. Definitely on my to watch list.
And hopefully we're bringing you back in. Hopefully you can claim that Devils fandom again. Hopefully we brewed some fire that Scott Stevens and that Ken Danico, Martin Brodeur fire is brewing in you again. And maybe, next time we talk to you, maybe you're working for the Devils. But who knows?
Yeah, and next time, remind me to tell you about that one time I went to the Continental Air Arena to watch a game. That was pretty
okay.
Pretty
Jack,
odd experience.
We'll definitely have you on again because we have to talk about the Continental Airlines Arena. We have to, but we will talk about that. That's what we call a tease in the professional broadcasting world. We will talk to you again soon. Thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us.
All right, take care, buddy. See ya.
Great interview, Nick.
I am as good as my guests.
I was hiding.
I mean, listen, I have followed Jack for a long time. I have tried to get him on at the perfect time. And right now, he's not really inundated with so much different hockey talk or hockey, situations. He was talking about the Sanderson contract, and I just had to. I was like, I got to talk to him because I have this theory in my head that this is going on. And honestly, until I talked to him, I was like, I forgot about the Stützle contract in Ottawa and how that could also impact this because Stützle looks like a star up there as well. But to be fair, Stützle doesn't look like he's anywhere close to Hughes. I know Ottawa fans like to pretend he does, but Hughes legitimately, from the biggest hockey minds in the world, Hughes is up there. Did you hear him, Sam? Hughes is up there with Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, and Nathan McKinnon. Those are the three best players in the league, maybe next to Cale Makar and Igor Shesterkin. And Jack Hughes, he's on the cover. This is a cover player. You know, it's insane that he wasn't on the cover of NHL, the EA Sports game. But
he will be in 2025.
I feel like that, right? You're gonna just put the three brothers, right? You're gonna do a Quinn, Luke, Jack cover. I think that's what I think that's what EA is waiting for.
I'm surprised they never did that with the Stalls, but they're not elite like the
Stalls.
Hughes brothers.
Well, Eric Stahl was on the cover once.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but I think it was just a different. I think it was just a different time. They wanted the one player, right? But now they're getting like creative. Like last year, they had Zegras and Sarah Nurse on the cover, and that was cool. I like that. I thought it was a cool touch. I haven't seen the cover. I just know it's Makar. Have you seen a cover, or is that not out yet?
I haven't seen it. I don't know. If
I don't think it's out yet, to be fair, but it'll be out soon. I think it'll probably be cool. It'll be awesome, just like last year's. But anyway, Sam, I'm ready for plugs. How about you?
Yeah, let's plug away.
All right, so pucksandpitchforks.com. I took a small break, just a week, to kind of I had a big article to write for fanside.com, the front page, and we've moved to a new system, so I just needed time to get settled with that. But I'm back, better than ever. So far this week, I've written about Keith Kincaid. I've written about Tomas Tatar signing with Colorado. That was a surprise. I didn't expect that to happen. I didn't even talk about that, but that kind of blew my mind that Tomas Tatar signed with Colorado. I talked about how the Devils are the Kings of New York again because your Giants kind of blew a turd, and Aaron Rodgers blew an Achilles. So we're back, baby. Devils are Kings of New York Metro. Talked about Quinn Hughes' captaincy and what this means for the future. I think you'll like this one, Sam. I talked about how the NHL needs a red zone-like product. And some people have pointed out that they kind of do that on game days, but no, you need to advertise the hell out of it. You need Arda Ocal to be the host. Arda Ocal. Make Arda Ocal the host. He would kill it at the NFL red zone product for the NHL. Call it NHL Power Play. You follow power plays. If there's no power play, you go for offensive zone faceoffs. You show, and you promise to show every single goal of the night, right? They promise to show you every single touchdown in the red zone. Show every single goal. If I know I'm going to see every single goal, the dirty goals, the clean goals, the nice goals, the ugly goals, all of them, I'm going to watch that product. That's what's on pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm doing the heavy lifting right now. It's September. People are preparing for the season. But, yeah, that's what we got right now, Sam.
Wow. That's great. Well, I will go to pucksandpitchforks.com. I have nothing to plug other than Season 7 is upon us. Season 7's upon us.
Is the flagship back?
This Sunday.
This Sunday, baby.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because Shorts Guy asked, are we going back on soon? It's like, how many times do I have to tell you guys? September 17th. He said he forgot.
It's my birthday present.
Is it your birthday?
It's Saturday is my birthday.
Well, happy birthday, Nick. I didn't know that.
We have a birthday around the same time.
Yeah, but mine's more important.
How?
Anyway, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Again, you know that BSing that my wife keeps on saying? It just happened right there. Anyway.
But I call you out on it. You know, I'm like nobody else. Like everybody else just lets you say your things and like moves on with their life. I don't. I need to know where you get this stuff from.
I don't know, but I do need to talk to you off air about something.
All right, let's make it quick.
All right, thank you to everybody. Thank you for the super chat, Nate. Nate loves this podcast because every Thursday and Mondays, or Mondays or Thursdays, he needs his Let's Go Devils podcast. Well, he's going to get it dropped at midnight for his morning and afternoon commute. Hopefully I'll wake up tomorrow morning for another Morning Woo edition. All right, go to pucksandpitchforks.com. Till next time, let's go Devils.